Today, we're really just kind of giving you a bit of background, why this call's coming out, who Interact are, and what it's all about. And we'll hopefully give you some pointers that might help you make a good, strong application and tell you a little bit about the process that we'll go through. Okay, so as I said, this is just a short call, really just to introduce Made Smarter Innovation and Interact, and to tell you a bit about the funding call itself, the scope, how you apply, the timetable and so on. And we'll also tell you a little bit about upcoming events at the end. So next slide, please. So I can see there's a few familiar faces. People have already met at other Interact events, so welcome. And there's a few new faces as well, so looking forward to getting to know you. Some of you already know Interact. Interact is part of the Made Smarter Innovation Challenge, which is funded by UKRI. I'll tell you about it in a second, but Interact specifically is funded through the ESRC. And it's really all about bringing together a network of people to try and improve the UK's manufacturing position and to improve the UK in terms of industrial digital technologies. Now, there's a lot of money basically being put into Made Smarter as a whole, and a lot of that money has been going to developing technologies, which is fantastic. But something you'll hear me say a lot of the time is technology alone is not enough. And thankfully, UKRI recognised this and ESRC stepped up to bring the voice of social scientists in to help achieve the aims of Made Smarter. And that was where Interact was formed. And myself, Jill McBride, and I'm based at Strathclyde, which is Strathclyde Business Schools, the building that's behind me here. Myself and Jan Godsill, and Jan is the Dean down at Loughborough, the business school. We're the co-directors of Interact. And what we're trying to do is to kind of create this network where we bring social science people together with the technologists, with industry, with policymakers to try and build this kind of interdisciplinary community that moves us forward in achieving the Made Smarter aims. So the network itself has a number of different facets. And part of it is the commissioned research pot. So we do have some core research, which is research we identified right at the start that was needed to help move Made Smarter forward. But the commissioned research projects is really pass-through money. So we're managing it on behalf of ESRC. So we go by ESRC's rules in everything that we do in this space. So let me start by talking about Made Smarter innovation. Because if you're putting a bid into us, you've got to be aware of this kind of background in the context. So we're part of the Made Smarter Innovation family, Interact are, and the Made Smarter Innovation Challenge is trying to help UK manufacturing, as I've said before, to be more competitive, to adopt digital technology, to become more resilient, and to become and to move towards our net zero goals. And as I say, whilst technology is really important, we recognise that there's many social and economic factors that are going to play a huge part in achieving these aims. And that's where Interact comes in. So, as I've said already, it's funded by UKRI, specifically through ESRC, and it's all about that human side of the Made Smarter Innovation Challenge. And what our kind of strapline, if you like, we talk about pioneering human insight for industry. So it's all about people and the social sciences. And one of the things that we do in Interact is we work really closely with other partners. So there's other investments that have been made under the MSI banner. And some of those are made by EPSRC that are more technological. Some of them are through Innovate UK and are helping companies and a whole host of other things. But Interact really kind of sits in the middle and kind of brings the social sciences to this network. So at this slide here, I really just want to stress that the Made Smarter innovation objectives. So keep these in mind if you're making a bid for this funding pot. Ultimately, Interact is trying to achieve these objectives. So if you're making an application to us, we would hope that you're addressing at least one of these objectives. So you can take a minute just to look at them, but bear these in mind. The presentation, I think, has been recorded, and Will share the slides with you. So you can come back to this at any time. But when you're making a bid, you should be thinking, am I helping Interact and ultimately UKRI to meet these Made Smarter innovation objectives, or one of them at least? And at that point, I'm going to pass on to Angela, who's going to tell you a bit more about the call itself and the kind of money that you could be asking for in this call. Angela.
The open funding call is a single commissioned research call with a total budget of £400,000, and there will be 8 awards. There's no minimum value for a request, but the maximum that should be awarded to any single project is £62,500. 80% of this will be funded by Interact, so hence the maximum funding will be £50,000. And the maximum duration for any project is 8 months. So the scope of the project, as I said, the funding is available for 8 projects that we believe will be of interest to the Made Smarter community. Projects are welcome from a broad range of economic and social sciences that will create actionable insights to support the delivery of the 5 Made Smarter Innovation Challenge objectives.
So we are very open to receive economic and social insights from the absolute broadest range of the economic and social sciences, but it sometimes helps for people to have some idea of the types of themes that they might want to address. Now, at the heart of Interact, we're all about creating the digital future of manufacturing that we want together, and the Interact programme has 3 core elements of a research programme that underpins it. And so myself, I'm leading the digital future of manufacturing ecosystems. Jill's looking at the future of work, and Vanya's looking at the future of the economy. And so what we're going to do now is each of us will just explain some of the potential themes under our particular areas, and then there's some other questions that are more general that are potential themes you could choose to explore. These themes are not exhaustive, so you may have an idea that's slightly different. As long as it's aligning to those 5 Interact objectives, that's absolutely fine. If anything, what Jill, Vanya and I are just about to do is to give you some ideas to get your creative juices flowing, as opposed to providing a prescriptive list. So in my sort of area, looking at the digital future of the manufacturing ecosystem, some of the areas that we could look at are the ecosystem itself. And so what you might be looking at is the role of the industrial digital technologies in enabling that, particularly for small and medium sized enterprises or SMEs that are at the core of manufacturing. But equally, we don't know whether the future is going to be sector agnostic as we move to perhaps more distributed manufacturing networks, or whether or not we're going to see specific sectors dominate. So perhaps you'd like to look at some of the either sector specific challenges or that sector agnostic view. Really exploring maybe how relevant are sectors to the future of manufacturing ecosystem. I think if we think about things like the recent disruptions we've seen as this cumulative effect of COVID, Brexit and the invasion of Ukraine, things that we looked at separately, like resilience or productivity or sustainability, we're really being able to see their interconnected nature. And so sometimes we need to make trade-offs between them. And so maybe some of the things you might want to explore is how digitalization can enable the trade-off between resilience, productivity and sustainability within that UK manufacturing ecosystem. And what's the type of behaviour change that might be required to support that? And then last but not least, I think as part of some of our work, both through Interact and some of our other projects looking at the future of manufacturing, we can see that there is both the ability to decarbonise manufacturing or manufacturing ecosystem, as well as to create practices that are more circular. And there's a strong belief that becoming more resource efficient and more energy efficient should help us to achieve net zero by 2050. But what is the actual empirical evidence? You know, is this just, how do we turn this gut feel feeling into something where we can more scientifically show that connection? What's the role of industrial digital technologies in supporting that goal? But equally, what are the things that will enable it or inhibit its adoption? So they're just some of the themes, and I'll just hand over to Jill now, who will explore some themes from a future of work perspective.
Thanks, Jan. As Jan said, these are absolutely not exhaustive, but this is kind of things that have been coming up as we've been talking to our stakeholders and kind of working with our colleagues at ESRC and UKRI more widely, and also in consultation with our strategic advisory board. So they are just ideas; they are not necessarily a list. But the first one I wanted to talk about is the kind of effect on businesses and entrepreneurship. And we kind of all know that digital technology will give us new opportunities for manufacturers. And some of you might have heard Jan talk about the future of manufacturing ecosystems at other events, and talking about, you know, predictions that perhaps what we're going to see is a move away from big factories, and we'll see much more of a kind of interconnected system of manufacturers. Or you might have seen me talk about at other webinars, for example. You might have seen or heard me talk about business model innovation and opportunities for manufacturers. That perhaps companies will take new directions, they'll work with new partners, they'll create value in different ways, and digital being the enabler. So I think we recognise that digital technology does offer opportunities, but again, as Jan said, we need to know a bit more about this, and look at it in more detail. So some examples might be about what are the future business models, but also kind of asking questions about how digital technologies contribute to the development. It might be asking questions around digital security, cyber security, or you might even be interested in taking more of a policy angle on this question and thinking about what needs to be done to help support business model innovation in our communities. The second kind of broad topic that came up in our discussions was the link between digital technology and well-being. In our core research programme, when we're looking at the future of work, we're probing this a little bit. And you might have seen me, I've done blogs recently about the question of, is digital technology going to help us with issues around equality, diversity and well-being? But again, when we actually kind of look at the evidence so far, there's lots of contradictory things out there. So I think there's a space there for people who are interested in this area, looking at questions around does digital technology support health and well-being, and how can we encourage this more inclusive and healthier workplace? And then the third one on my list that kind of comes under the broad heading of the future of work and digital technology is the whole issue of equality, diversity and inclusion, which is very core to everything that we do here at Interact. So it might be that you want to work particularly with a group of organisations that are maybe looking at this just now, or again, it might be that you're taking it more from a policy angle. So we're open to suggestions in this space. So that's the kind of broad headings that I can see under the future of work heading. I'm going to hand over to Vania, who looks more at the economy.
Okay, thank you very much, Jill. And just to give a bit of background information about the future of economy. So this is really a research program that wants to understand what impact digitalization on manufacturing will have on the industrial structure, on the social mobility, or the impact on consumers and intergenerational mobility, and the impact that the digitalization will have on the structure of the of places and on regional growth. So at this stage, what we would like to understand a bit more, and we would like to have project in this area is really about the contribution that digitalization has on the development of a resilient economy. So we can assume that digitalization may make an industry more resilient to future shocks, but how this translates into the development of resilience at the economy level. So what are the channels through which digitalization may make the economy stronger and resilient in case of future shocks? And here we are open to research that is quantitative or can be qualitative. We are interested in case studies. So please feel free to develop research projects that you think may well address the questions that we have here. We do have a second theme that look at the leveling up and the impact of digitalization on regional growth. So we are all familiar with the concept of leveling up, but what we would like to understand is how will digitalization of manufacturing contribute to to sustain regional growth in areas that are less developed in the UK. So what are the channels? How do we get around unlocking the benefits of digitalization in local economy? And we are also interested in looking at the impact that digitalization may have on work and how this will impact regional growth. So in this way, we're going to create a link between the second theme led by Jill and the theme on the future of the economy. But please don't consider this to be just an exhaustive list. Feel free to submit research proposals that you think may contribute to the development of the research agenda around the future of the economy. Thank you very much. And I think I will pass it back to Jane and Jill.
It's back to me because actually when we were reviewing the potential themes with the Made Smarter Challenge team, actually the Deputy Director raised another potential area that's a bit more cross-cutting. If you think about the 5 MSI objectives, they're quite broad-reaching. And what he was wondering, and I suppose it's also a bit like the link between productivity, sustainability and resilience, what they want to know is there a relationship between the 5 MSI objectives, and is there an objective that is more key to the delivery of the overall programme success? Or, so for instance, sometimes when I think about productivity, sustainability and resilience, we think maybe if you focused on sustainability, then in a way that might drive the productivity and resilience elements, or perhaps you think that it's resilience that drives the other two. So again, I think this is just an example that you can think out of the box, that they don't necessarily need to align to the themes, but this was perhaps one of those slightly more out of the box type of themes. Actually, the Deputy Challenge Director was quite keen to understand. So there's some of the themes, I suppose, to get your creative juices flowing. And what we want to now is to sort of shift our heads a little bit to thinking about what success from these projects would look like. And obviously, success actually will look like some kind of impact. And that's an impact both in terms of a contribution to theory and to academic practice. But as Jill mentioned earlier, our Interact is very much about creating actionable insight. So it's the way that we as economic and social scientists can take our perspectives and turn it into a format that could be used by an industrial digital technology provider, a policymaker, or a manufacturer. And so if you want, I would strongly advise that there's a section about this when we come to scoring, that you need to look and think quite carefully about what's the, I suppose, pathways to impact and the outputs of your research. And a minimal type of output is likely to be some kind of industry-facing report. But because impact is so important to our project, you'll actually work with Sachin, our impact manager, to actually complete an impact map and to consider how you might use more innovative outputs, whether they be tools, proof of concept, multimedia demonstrations, videos and the like, to support you. On a slightly more mundane aspect, it could well be that data is quite an important feature of your projects. So please do consider any data management plan requirements that you need, particularly in terms of how you're going to curate and store and make the data available for future research where necessary. Now, what we like to do is actually build on previous knowledge. Will, could you go to the next slide, please? And actually, prior to being part of Interact with Jill and Vanya, I was actually a co-I on the Transform Construction Network Plus. And as part of that project, we spent quite a lot of time thinking about impact. And the reason Sachin actually has an Interact version of this map that if you're successful, we'll work with you to develop. But the reason why I'm sharing this now, you can download the guide from this website, which we should be able to put in chat. But why I'm sharing it now is to actually help you think about how you're going to write your bid and how you're going to successfully write your bid, because your bid is likely to have within it some kind of overarching research question. But then in order to deliver that, your research design will have a series of activities. Those activities will lead on to a number of outputs, which we've just been discussing, and hopefully some of those outputs will enable actionable insights that can be used by, as we said, the manufacturers, the industrial digital technology providers and policymakers. So for each of your outputs, it's really useful to think about who are your target stakeholders, and then actually which of the MSI outcomes you're going to align to. So whilst you may not use the full impact map as part of your proposal, actually thinking about this as a way of starting to structure your thoughts might really help to strengthen your proposal, because it will show that logic between your activities, the outputs, the target stakeholders, and your alignment to the MSI objectives. Because what we've seen with some of our previous grants, and for those of you, some of you may have attended our How to Write Successful Small Grants workshop last week. If not, I think you can access the recording via YouTube. But actually, we're extremely transparent in how we judge our grants, and actually we're very transparent in terms of giving you the help you need to write a good grant. But what we could see when we've been reviewing some of the earlier grant applications is some of the best ideas were not funded, not because they weren't good ideas, but because they didn't actually fill out the paperwork in the right way. And all applications, regardless of size, so you can apply for a grant up to £62,000, but you could equally just put in a smaller grant for say £30,000, but regardless of size, the criteria are the same. So putting in a small grant doesn't increase your chances of success. It's all fairly equal. The only way we consider the size of the grant is in the value for money. But what you'll see is there's 5 areas: contribution, rigour, management, value for money, and impact. And each of those have 3 sub-factors, which is all totally transparent in our bid paperwork, which are then judged against 3 criteria. You will get a 0 if you do not meet the criteria. You will get a 1 if it's partially met, and you will get a 3 if it's fully met. What you need to do as you're writing your grant application is check that you're actually meeting those criteria, because quite often what we saw in some of the earlier rounds is really good ideas perhaps got a 0 because they didn't link into one of the MSI objectives, or another common reason for getting 0 was the actual research wasn't transdisciplinary. So if you read the bid documentation carefully, almost start by understanding the scoring criteria. And actually, one of the other pieces of advice we gave in the Writing Successful Grants workshop is give these scoring criteria to a good critical friend and get them to review your bid against it, so that in their opinion, they can tell you whether they think you're missing something or not. Because in that way, you'll be increasing your chances of grant success, because we want as many people to be successful and as diverse a range of people to be successful as possible. I think I'm going to hand back over to Angela.
So the grant conditions, successful applicants will receive a grant award letter with the terms and conditions set out in a grant disbursement agreement. Now, applicants must make sure that these terms and conditions are acceptable with their research organisation before applying, because the terms and conditions, which are found on the website at the moment, are not negotiable. Now, our timetable, we've launched the call today with this briefing webinar. Then next Wednesday, we've got a Q&A follow-up session. So if we don't answer any of your questions today, then there is the opportunity next Wednesday. The call is then open until Friday, the 9th of September, and we hopefully will get a funding decision to successful and unsuccessful applicants by the 19th of October. And then hopefully with contracts set up, we can start projects Monday, the 28th of November. As I said previously, the projects run for 8 months, so the closing date will be the end of July next year. Now, to download an application pack, please visit our website. All the information is on there at the moment. As I said, the deadline is the 9th of September, and any submissions should be sent to the email address at our general info@interacthub.org.
And now to hear from me briefly, I'm Will, I'm the comms manager for the project. Just to add to what Angela said there, the webpage for this call specifically will go live about 1:30 today. So if you go on before then and don't see it, do not be alarmed. It will be up and available. We will also be sharing that on our social media with our mailing list as well. So I would strongly recommend that you go to our website and sign up for our mailing list. You'll get all the latest on our news, events and funding opportunities, so you can keep up to date that way. Just a word on our upcoming events if you're interested. We have a session coming up on the 7th of July. If you would like to attend that, we do have a few places left, but it is imperative you get in touch as soon as possible, because we do need to inform our hosts, who will be Siemens at Congleton, of any additional attendees. That's an opportunity to kind of see supply chain innovation in action, hear a bit about what Jan will be leading on her work stream on the digital future of manufacturing ecosystems, and hear from Siemens themselves about how they've worked in knowledge transfer partnerships to improve their processes. An important one to save the date for as well, our annual conference will be taking place on the 3rd of October. That's a Monday, and it will take place at the IET Savoy Place in London. We'll have more details of that forthcoming. Once again, if you are on our mailing list, you'll get the full details of that as and when it's released, including our speakers for this year. Just finally, as I've mentioned, I would strongly recommend you follow us on social media or sign up to our mailing list just to keep up to date with what we're doing. If you have any questions, please do email us at info@interacthub.org to find out more.
Sorry, can I just add that for those of you that perhaps coming from an aspect of the social sciences and have had not very much to do with manufacturing beforehand, then coming to the Discovery Day is really just a good opportunity to understand the manufacturing context. And we really do want potentially people that have done research that's nothing to do with manufacturing to think about how they could translate it over. And so the Discovery Day could just be a good way for you to understand that context, so that you can start to make that link. It really isn't essential to be successful with these grants that you've looked at manufacturing previously. It's just got to be that you can make a contribution to the manufacturing context.
Okay, have we got time for a few questions, Will?
I believe so, yes. We're well ahead of schedule, so.
Yep, you can either put it in chat or put your hand up. Hamid, yep.
Hello, thanks for the presentation. Just a quick question. Can the application be, can multiple universities together apply for this?
Yes, and that's indeed what happened with the successful bids from the previous, the grants we've had so far. They, in fact, both of our small grants were with 2 institutions.
And is there a minimum or maximum number of people involved?
No, but you just need to make sure that you can, it's not a lot of money, so you need to just think carefully about what they're going to do and how you're going to spread the love, so to speak, Hamid.
All right, thank you.
I think was Elaine next with her hand up.
Hi guys. One of my questions was already just answered, which was the size of the teams. The other one, just to clarify, is there a limit to the number of objectives we need to hit from the Made Smarter? Is it just one?
Yeah, just one.
Okay,
If
that's
you
fine.
do more, great, but yeah, as long as you hit one, that's fine.
Okay, great. That's fine. Thank you.
Possibly wasn't quick enough looking at who had their hand up
I
next.
think it's Chris next.
Chris.
Oh, hello. Thanks for that. I just had a couple of questions, and thank you for the presentation. Is it possible to get any informal feedback on an idea without having to go through the obviously very long and complicated cycle to put in a bid only to find that it's really not what is wanted? Is that going to be possible?
Yes, I think if you email Angela in the first instant as our network manager, then she can field any questions or queries that you might have. I understand what you're saying. You just want to know that you're in scope before you get going.
Yeah. Yes, and just the second one, Jan, you mentioned interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary. Does that mean that the teams need to be comprised of people from different disciplines?
Yes.
Or, yes.
And actually, that's one of the criteria that's really important, because that's what Interact's about. It's about bringing together different perspectives. So it's really important that in your bid that you bring together different perspectives.
Thank you.
Rachel was next. Was Rachel next?
Hi there, it's Rachel Lamb from the University of Nottingham. I was just going to ask, because I'm an early career researcher, having previously worked for 20 years in industry, and a lot of my research is in innovation management, particularly in manufacturing and aerospace manufacturing. But what I haven't got is a very significant network of academic contacts, and so I wondered, is there any way of, you know, those people like myself who've perhaps got ideas for this sort of funding call, but maybe, you know, to connect us with other people who may be interested?
What we did last time, Rachel, was the Q&A session. We kind of used that to let people kind of, you know, say I'm interested if anybody else out there wants to talk. So perhaps that's something we can maybe do next week. If you're interested, you've put it out there already. Maybe people will get in touch in the meantime. But if not, maybe the Q&A session's a time that we could do that.
Yeah, also use the Interact LinkedIn group to share your ideas and see whether or not any other people are interested. Take an opportunity now to drop it in chat, because it could be that someone else on this call might be interested. And if all that fails, then email us and tell us what your idea is. And if Jill, Vanya, or Phil's joined us now, another CI, if we know of anyone that might benefit, then we can try and connect you as well.
That's brilliant. Thank you.
Interact's about creating a network, so it's as much about us connecting people together as it, and you know, some of that might be through grants, but some of it could just be through our natural activities that lead to other funding opportunities, or you doing different activities together. It doesn't really matter as long as we get interacting.
Thank you very much.
I think there's another question from Yang.
Hi everyone. So there are two questions. One is about the value for money part. The thing is, currently we are preparing a proposal for another call called Impact Acceleration Program. So I did notice this section. So we could find some general guidelines about the money, the funding size that you should claim depends on what you're gonna bring as the deliverables. But I just wonder if we have some clear criteria could be shared with applicants for that part. It would be quite helpful.
I think that's maybe one for Sachin, our impact manager. But what I would say just now is the difference between, we've got a call that's open just now for impact grants, which closes very soon. Is that next week? Sachin will keep me right on that one as well. But those ones are more meant for people who've already done research that could have useful impacts in the real world. Whereas this call is more about doing new research, which again is impactful, but you don't need to have done the work already.
Yeah.
So, Sasha, anything you want to add to that?
No, that sounds about right. You can apply for both. So there's nothing stopping you from applying for this and for that. But if you want to, for example, do this research and then top up the impact with an impact acceleration grant next year, that's fine too. So it depends on whether this year is more suitable for you, if you've got some results from research, or you'd like to apply for the impact acceleration grant next year.
Yeah, well, thank you. So the question I'm asking is about the value for money criteria. So this is one of
Yes, Yang, the value for money criteria will have 3 criteria which will be very explicitly outlined on the bid document. I have to say it's very difficult. Value for money is an easy one to demonstrate. It just means that what you're proposing to do is sensible and well costed. So what you're not doing is saying I'm going to use 10 grand to go to a conference, which is just a ridiculous amount of money to go to a conference. It's very hard to not score okay on the value for money side as long as what you're suggesting is proportionate. So out of all the criteria, it's probably one of the ones that you need to worry least about. But fear not, if you look at that actual scoring sheet, there's 3 criteria around value for money that are very explicitly outlined. But I have to say, from reviewing our other bids, people are not normally struggling with the value for money. Where we've had problems before is people get their FEC number wrong. So the total value of your bids can be £62,500. In fact, that's what you want to cost to. I'd say to anybody, if you're going to go to the effort of writing this bid, you may as well go for all the money.
Okay.
But however, and then what happens is we give your university 50,000, and then the university gives you the other 12,500, so you have a £62,500 grant. That's how it works. What we just need to know is that then how you put your costings in that grant, how much time you've got for the co-investigators, how much time for the postdoc, and then any money that you've set aside for videos or report writing or attending things is proportionate. Where people have gone wrong is they've got their FEC mixed up. So they've applied to us, the total costing might have been, say, 75,000, and they've asked us for 62,500. The total cost needs to be 62,500, and you ask us for 50,000. But even in those cases, we were a bit generous first time round and sort of went through with a view that we could perhaps finesse the finances. But we've now improved our method of communicating that explanation. And if you use your research office, you shouldn't make a mistake with that side of things.
Thank you, Jan. We won't make those mistakes. But my question was meant to ask what kind of cost could be considered as high value, or what kind of spending should not appear on our proposal. So that's my
So we can't say exactly, because you might come up with a really creative idea, but what we can say is it needs to be proportionate. So if you wanted to spend £30,000 on going on a conference, you're unlikely to be successful. If you wanted to spend £2,000 or £3,000 going to a conference, and that was, say, somewhere that's expensive to get to, then that would be proportionate. So it's about the cost being proportionate to the activity that you want to do. That's what value for money means.
Okay, thank you.
I think that's the last of the hands that I can see up, just double checking.
There's a question in the chat, Jill, which is about, do we need to, so you definitely don't need to have a manufacturer at this stage. So what Intract's about is about having insights from social science. They could come from a range of different backgrounds, but what they need to be able to do is to create an actionable insight that could be used by a manufacturer. So you most certainly don't need to have a manufacturer on board at the moment, but you need to think about the manufacturer or an industrial digital technology provider or policymakers involved in manufacturing as the potential recipients of those insights. So your research would need to be of interest to them. So you could be transferring knowledge from a different context into manufacturing, but you most certainly, absolutely, it is not essential to have a manufacturer on board at this stage.
There's another question I see there, Jan. Leanne's asking, does it have to be a university? It does have to be led by a university or research organisation at this stage. You know, you can have other people involved, but the money has to be distributed to a university or research organisation. Are we out of questions, do we think? In that case, I think we'll close for today. But as I say, you're very welcome. If you've got questions, come back next week to the Q&A session, which will be just very informal. You can come along, ask your question and leave, or stay and hear what other people are talking about and take part in the chat. Okay, thanks very much, everybody. And I will see some of you next week. Don't forget, if you want to join Jan at the Siemens Discovery Day, please let us know pretty soon, because that's coming up shortly. Thanks, everybody. See you next week. Bye-bye.